on, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me is Leonard. This is a show about wrestling. And this week, we are going to be doing another edition of our Spotlight series. And before we get to that, how was your Christmas, Leonard?
It was pretty good. I am wearing one of my Christmas presents from my wife, Jenny, which is, for those of you on YouTube can see it, it is a Macho Man Randy Savage shirt that says the cream of the crop.
Very
one
nice.
Of his famous promos. She got me a couple other wrestling shirts and few other things. At the time of this recording, we haven't got to visit my family yet to do our Christmas exchange, but we're going to do that. How about you and your Christmas?
It was very good, thank you. I'm wearing a shirt as well, Heart Foundation, which is in the style of the NBA Jam. It's the Homage series, which I highly recommend, simply because they're soft style shirts, which is kind of the only thing I like to wear these days. But anyway, I'm glad that your Christmas was good, and I hope everybody had a good New Year. By the time you watch this, It will be 2022. And I will say we're sorry to hear about the passing of Corporal Kirshner, aka Leatherface. We did an episode on him, and we both learned a lot more about him. And in my case, I definitely got a lot more respect for him after learning just how extensive his career was over in Japan and whatnot. Very sorry to hear of his passing. Way too young, unfortunately. It seemed like heart issues there, which is a very common tale with wrestlers who have retired, and because who knows what they put their body through over the years that happens. But very sorry to hear about that. And still a lot going on in the wrestling industry. Just as we're speaking, Toni Storm up and left WWE, asked for her release and got it after being in the title picture, I should say, with Charlotte Flair. Very interesting stuff. Maybe when Leonard does his month-long journey into modern current wrestling, we can talk more about why she decided to do that, because I have my own thoughts. But
yes, well, if I remember correctly, I said I would watch AEW for a month. I don't think I have it in my schedule to watch WWE and AEW and whatever else.
I mentioned that because logic would tend to lean that she will show up in AEW, because as much as they keep building the roster, it's mostly been male talents. I mean, I know last night Mercedes Martinez debuted on AEW, but there is still room in the female division there. So I would guess that you will see her in AEW. So
yes, I believe I remember reading there was a tweet from Britt Baker that vaguely alluded to her possibly coming over or welcoming her or something of that.
Yeah, it was like, well, what I saw was just Britt Baker tweeting out a picture of Toni Storm.
Yes,
with the NXT UK champion belt. So I think it would be a better fit for her there. I would assume she left because she could probably see the writing on the wall, which is you're gonna become cannon fodder for the top people there, and then you're kind of just moved down the card and out of the picture. But
and again, I haven't started watching AEW yet, but from what I know, they have some great female talent. They have Serena Deeb, they have Thunder Rosa. You said Mercedes Martinez wrestling debut. Toni Storm comes over. I think Britt Baker has been the cream in that division since maybe the beginning. Allusion to the shirt I'm wearing again. And it's just that they haven't really maybe booked them strongly, or a lot of what I know is listening from Jim Cornette's podcast, and he puts
you got to stop doing that.
Yes, on Kenny Omega's fetish for these Japanese wrestlers. And I do have to say, when I was watching AEW early on, I did see I believe it was the match that crowned the first women's champion, which was Riho versus Nyla Rose, and it was one of the worst matches I'd ever seen between two women, on a national scale. And a lot of that had to do with size. Not only are they do drastically different sized opponents, but they don't know how to wrestle for their size. Nyla doesn't know how to wrestle in a big person style. Riho doesn't know how to wrestle with, like, she's like doing power bombs on Nyla Rose. It doesn't make any sense. So, and again, this is something from 2 years ago when they first started. But from everything I know, the talent is there, but maybe not the booking yet.
Well, I mean, I will say this: AEW has put on storylines involving women that doesn't involve the title that I have found interesting. Specifically, one recently with Serena Deeb. That her storyline didn't involve a title at all. When was the last time you can think of that happening, where a storyline involving female talent that didn't involve the championship or a championship of any sort was interesting to you just because of the feud itself? It doesn't happen that often at all. But there is certainly room for improvement. They have a new title coming there, the TBS title, which is a weird name, but it is what it is. They're serving their masters, so to speak.
Yes.
But anyway, this week, as I said, it is Spotlight Series time, and we are going to be talking about Sam Houston, which was a idea proposed by Leonard, and we'll get to why towards the end of the episode.
Although anyone who has watched the show probably has a good idea as to why I would want to cover somebody, but we'll get to that.
Right. So let's get some early years going on Sam Houston. He was born Michael Maurice Smith, October 11th, 1963. And he stands these days anyway at 6'1". His family was very big in the wrestling business. His father is Grizzly Smith. His big brother is Jake Roberts, and his little sister is Rockin' Robin. And, obviously there is a really great Dark Side of the Ring episode out there about this family and what they had to go through. And we don't need to reiterate any of that here. I highly recommend checking it out. It is really, really good.
Now, I would like to say about the family connection is that, as a kid at the time, I had no idea that they were all three related. I didn't find out till later on, and then became, kind of quite surprised. I can kind of see the family resemblance between Robin and Sam, not so much Jake, but again, Jake was a half brother. And I was thinking today that's kind of odd as opposed to today's wrestling, where everybody knows, Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt are brothers, and Mike Rotunda is their dad. He's married to Barry Windham's sister. Like, that's just out there because of the internet and how deep fans get. But back then, you would have no idea who was related to who. So when I found that out, which I don't know was probably maybe the early days of the internet in the late 90s, I was surprised by that. And of course, I didn't know anything about Grizzly Smith at the time, learned later. And again, as you mentioned, the Dark Side of the Ring episode will tell you all you need to know about we'll just say the family dynamic there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the internet factor. I also would say that I don't think any of the kids involved in this picture back then were eager to get their connection to their father out there. And you know what? Maybe he wasn't eager to spread that around either. I don't know, but that's just a guess of mine. Whereas you mentioned Bo Dallas and Bray Wyatt, who one would assume are very proud of their father and have a good relationship with him.
Yeah, more or less. But, that was something that was never really talked about on air. I don't think there may have been some wink, nudges to the fact that they were related,
right.
But it wasn't really advertised. But again, everybody knew. Just a side note, while we're here, like, I always thought it was weird that they decided to change Joe Hennig's name to Curtis Axel, but then tell everybody he was Kurt Hennig's son. Like, then why did you change his name?
Right. Well, since we're on this topic, let's talk about Braun Breaker.
Yes.
In NXT. Look, he is still coming along. He's got the size. I think for how green he is, his promos are just fine. But he looks like a Steiner. He dresses like a Steiner. He does Steiner moves, but he's Braun Breaker. This is one of those cases where WWE/Vince is doing this, I've got to own the name thing to a ludicrous level, in my opinion. I don't.
Right. You're going to make more money off of him as a Steiner. You can push him better as a Steiner.
Absolutely. But then if he were to leave, they might not own that name. And,
because it's his name.
God forbid. But Braun Breaker to me is such a stupid name. I'm sorry. Like I said, the in-ring work that he's done with Tommaso Ciampa and all those other guys, I've enjoyed so far. I don't watch NXT 2.0 anymore because of so many people leaving. But Braun Breaker is a pretty good prospect for what it's worth. I just simply think his name is cartoonish. But
because they didn't want to call him Bone Breaker.
Which, yeah.
Call him Bone Breaker, put him under a mask, let him season for a couple years, and then, introduce him as, what's his real name? Kid Steiner.
Right, Kid Steiner.
Kid Steiner.
Oh, boy. Anyway, back to Sam Houston.
Yes.
He grew up in the wrestling business, as I said, and he was a wrestler in high school. I read a really interesting article on Pro Wrestling Stories where they talked about his early life and the fact that he was never able to complete a year at any school fully because he was constantly moving around from territory to territory with his father. He did do really well at amateur wrestling in high school, and there's also a story when he was a junior of him, dying for 2 minutes on an operating table due to a throat infection that he was getting operated on for. So this guy's had quite the life. He really, really has. Yeah, and obviously he would eventually get into pro wrestling as if he really had any other choice. He would start wrestling in 1983, and he would initially be in championship wrestling from Florida with people like Dusty and so on and so forth. In 1985, he began working for Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. He was the protege of Dusty Rhodes and Magnum TA, and that kind of propelled him into a feud with the Four Horsemen. The Horsemen, which included Tully Blanchard, Ole Anderson, and Arn Anderson, would break his arm during a 6-man tag team match. There's even a promo I came across where Dusty gives the promo. Sam Houston doesn't really say much, where Sam Houston has 24 stitches in his forehead.
Yes.
Because of Tully. And it's a really good promo by Dusty. And, Sam Houston he looks like a little boy, at that time of his career.
Yeah, he was only 19, 20 years old. I believe they make a point that he was 19 at the time of the promo, but he may have been a little older than that.
Right.
I would have to do the math. But I did watch that promo, and there's another promo later I watched I want to talk about. But you can kind of see here that I think one knock that was always against Sam, that he wasn't a good promo. And here you've got Dusty doing all the talking, and
right.
Houston is standing there, and he doesn't seem to know what to do. He doesn't know where to look or what look to have on his face. And, I think that's very telling. But again, he's 19 years old. Yeah,
right.
He grew up in the business. But, and this is one thing that again, I'll save it for later. This is part of my WWE thought, so we'll get to that. But as far as promos go and wrestling, I think there's a couple key, minuses to him at this period.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we'll elaborate on that.
Mm-hmm.
He would feud with Crusher Khrushchev, aka Demolition Smash, and Leonard's favorite, the Repo Man, over the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship, which he won in January of 1986. He then got into a feud with Black Bart, who beat him for the title a few months later. He would also form a cowboy-themed tag team with Nelson Royal during his stint there in 1986. And so we will pause there just to discuss one of the matches that Leonard partially finished, which is, because I discovered what it was very late. And
shortly before we came on air, and I was watching it right before we wanted to get going. I didn't want to hold us up, but I watched about half of it, and you can fill me in on the other half.
Which is the match with Crusher Khrushchev where he won the Mid-Atlantic title. And it's one of the longer matches that you would see with him. Now, the clip that I found on Facebook also has full commercials from the period, which is always odd to me, but this is because somebody taped it and transferred it to online. So
I absolutely love it when they leave the commercials in. I love watching, because that's a real time capsule
oh yeah,
of the period, that you're just not seeing the show, but the commercials that accompanied the show, especially the old TBS.
oh
Because
absolutely.
because TBS had, I would say, maybe very specific commercials to TBS, not just for their programming, but they seem to have different maybe sponsors and say what the networks would have.
No, absolutely. But that is a good match. He did emerge victorious. There were a lot of shenanigans involved at the end because of the feud going on between the Road Warriors and the Russian characters that were there. So yeah, if you can find that one, I absolutely recommend checking that out. He would then from 1986 to 1987 kind of hop around. He was at the Central States Wrestling territory for a while, feuding with Bulldog Bob Brown and Bill Dundee. He would then go on to the Universal Wrestling Federation, where he teamed with Terry Taylor. And then eventually he would move on to the World Wrestling Federation, making his debut in May of 1987. And he would eventually make his television debut later in October, at the end of October of 1987, where he would defeat Danny Davis, dangerous Danny Davis, the former referee. But getting back to when he first debuted, he would defeat Sika at a house show, and he would be teaming up with Ted DiBiase, who was a babyface at that time, which I find interesting.
No, I do not remember that, but I read that myself, and I at that time, and still today, they will try stuff out at house shows to see how it plays before they debut it on television. Oddly enough, to reference Bray Wyatt again, Dan Weber and I, friend of the show, Dan Weber, and I saw at a house show at the Wheeling Civic Center Bray Wyatt months before he appeared on television. He had the name, he had the music, and the entrance and the clothes and everything, and we were all like, "Who is this guy? This is weird stuff," because we didn't have any context. But we saw him before his debut because they were trying it out on a house show. So again, I find it very weird that because I believe Ted was a face for a lot of his career, including when he was in the WWF in the very early '80s. I think this was even prior to Vince Jr. taking over. But imagining Ted now as a face is a little tough.
Yeah, and they would eventually face each other when Ted DiBiase became the $1 Million Man in one of the many squash matches that Sam Houston was in. But that was not the case here at the beginning. He was given wins against some of the enhancement talent like Jose Estrada, Barry Horowitz, and others. He wasn't on television a lot, but he would feud with Outlaw Ron Bass in matches that a lot of them ended in draws. As I said, he had a feud with Danny Davis, which it can never be as much as I enjoyed the Danny Davis stuff when he was a heel. It can't be a great sign of hope when that's the feud that you're put in.
Yes.
But anywho, they would trade wins from time to time. He would team with Scott Casey as a kind of a cowboy team, and for a while. And he did do a few things with brother Jake Roberts. I guess some run-ins and whatnot. He was in the first ever Royal Rumble, January 24th, 1988. And later made his first pay-per-view appearance at WrestleMania 4 when he was in the 20-man Battle Royal. And he would then get into a series of house shows with the Big Boss Man, and he would face other people like King Haku, Frenchie Martin, Kurt Hennig, Terry Taylor, the Red Rooster, Steve Lombardi, and did have a tag team with Hillbilly Jim, which seems like it would fit better than you might think. I don't know. I didn't find any of those matches, but
No, I like the idea though. I think the personalities was you have a cowboy and a hillbilly. They're kind of adjacent to each other. The fact that Jim was a more exuberant personality and a better talker than Sam. I really like the idea of that because I could see, Sam being the guy who takes most of the beat down and then Jim cleaning house at the end type of thing. I think that could work.
right, yeah. He would make his second pay-per-view appearance with when he actually teamed with the Ultimate Warrior, Blue Blazer, Jim Brunzell, and Brutus Beefcake at the second annual Survivor Series. They would win against Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine, Ron Bass, Bad News Brown, and Danny Davis. And so at this point, we're leading into 1989, and he can't really move past the lower level of competition. He wasn't working a lot, and when he did work, he was at this point a glorified jobber. Only he had a gimmick and music. But
so he was more of a jobber to the stars, as they kind of call it.
That's what they should all be called. Am I right? Jobber to the stars. That sounds like a really good way to describe it.
Yeah, well, jobbers lose to everybody. Jobber to the stars could beat a jobber, but can't beat anyone higher than that.
Right.
And as a kid, I vaguely remember Sam Houston. It's one of those names that, like, years later, someone said Sam Houston. I went, oh, yeah, I remember that guy. And it was from his stint in the WWF. And I think it was primarily from the few television appearances that he had, primarily the Royal Rumble and Survivor Series being in those. And of course, there was promotion that he was involved in heading into those pay-per-views. But I do remember him popping up on TV every now and again and not thinking a whole lot of him. Again, it was a generic cowboy character. Even as a kid, I recognized there was a hierarchy. This guy can beat this guy, but he can't beat that guy, type of thing. And recognizing that with him. And one thing I remember thinking of even as a kid, and I know this is something that we're going to talk about, is that I thought he was just kind of scrawny and awkward looking.
Right.
And when you compare him to his brother, Jake Roberts. Jake was never a muscle man, was never a bodybuilder, but he's just a naturally big dude. And Sam isn't. And even on a lot of the matches I watched, a lot of the commentators would mention that, how Sam was light or they would use kind of euphemisms for, he needs to put on some weight.
He was quick,
type of thing.
He was this, he was that. Like, yeah, they would do that a lot. And now that you brought this up, it is worth mentioning, because there are clips out there with Bruce Pritchard and Tony Schiavone and other people.
Yes, I know, and I watched those. Yes,
right.
Where they talk about that.
They mention his size and the fact that he needed to fill in a little bit, and Arn Anderson referred to the fact that it was his choice, but he didn't go to the gym a lot, as much as some of the other guys. And some people out there might think, well, who cares? Jake Roberts might not have gone to the gym a lot. Jake Roberts had psychology and just some of the best promos that you would ever see going for him. Sam Houston didn't have all that going for him. So the fact that he didn't work out maybe as intensely as some of the other guys, it is important, because in one of the clips that Leonard sent me, you see him next to superstar Billy Graham. And when you see those two next to each other, there is in your head no thought to the fact that Sam Houston might win. I mean, superstar Billy Graham is like chiseled out of granite. And on a side note, he wore a skull t-shirt in this match.
Yes.
He had a mustache, and I got a Stone Cold vibe. Like, I really did. Like, people always joke about how Hulk Hogan, used so many of superstar Billy Graham's things for his character. Like, there was definite Stone Cold thing going on there with his look, which I don't ever remember superstar Billy Graham just having a mustache, but
Well, this was Mid-Atlantic. This was during a period where Billy Graham himself admits that he was living on cocaine, And
it's easy to see that when he's doing all the martial arts gyration.
yes, he basically watched a bunch of Bruce Lee movies and was so high that he thought he could do karate. And the reason I sent it to you was the promo he does before the match is just him saying things that don't exist. Like he's a master of high tie and low tie and mid tie. And
It's ridiculous.
he tells the story about how him and his manager Paul Jones went to the Congo and he put the full Nelson on a 900-pound gorilla and killed the gorilla.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And then during the actual match, they don't even show much of it. That's how little they give to this match, is because they cut to Dusty Rhodes, who has bags of money,
right?
just sacks of money, just set on the set, and they're like, was it $10,000 to get a match with Tully Blanchard?
Yeah,
and that's how little focus they're giving to this match against Sam Houston and Billy Graham. Is that they basically put it in a little box in the corner so Dusty Rhodes can show off the bags of money that he has.
Yeah.
And that's why I showed it to you, because it starts out batshit crazy and just keeps going down that path.
Yeah, and also Sam Houston is in it, and he gets beat.
Yeah, and Sam Houston was in it, because I was looking at Sam Houston matches, and it came up, and it was kind of a longer clip, and I go, oh, maybe this is a longer match. It wasn't. It was just because it contained the pre-promo with Graham and Paul Jones.
Right. And so, you look at some of the sizes, and like, I'm not a guy who is really big on like, oh, they've got to be a certain height. And, Sam Houston was 6'1", weighed 277, so it wasn't a small guy. Like, if you look at him in there with people like Terry Taylor or some of those guys, like he's not small, but he clearly, it wouldn't have hurt him to fill in.
Tone up.
Yeah.
Tone up.
Right, as they say. But before we move on here, his last match was against the Barbarian, February 7th, 1991 in the WWF. And, because he would continue to just be as Leonard said, jobber to the stars, he left WWF and joined World Championship Wrestling, and he would debut for them April 17th in Alabama, where he defeated Jack Victory. And I would say, he would face people like the Diamond Stud, who is Scott Hall, Larry Zbyszko, Arn Anderson, Steve Austin, One Man Gang. But the most notable match, which is available on YouTube, was against Ric Flair. And it's about the same as any other Sam Houston match that we found, which is it's about 4, 5, 6 minutes long. And it's pretty much Sam Houston getting beat. But the fact that he got to work with Ric Flair, to me, is a cool part of your career, no matter what. But at this point, when I watched the Ric Flair match, at that point, Leonard, I got to thinking to myself, like, does this guy have a finisher? So I looked at some of his matches, and one match he did use a flying bulldog off the top rope as a finish. And he also has I don't know if I would call it his finisher as much of his trademark move, which is the flying head scissors that he used a lot too.
Yeah, and he does use a standard bulldog as well as a finisher. I believe it was the match I watched with Barry Horowitz that he won with his standard bulldog. Right.
So yeah, I mean, he did win some matches, and like I said, he had entrance music in WWF, and I assume in WCW as well. So he would be there for a little bit, but then from 91 to 93, he would kind of be on the independent circuit, where he would wrestle for the United States Wrestling Association, and he, which had bought up the World Class Championship Wrestling promotion. He would again feud with people like Black Bart. He also faced a guy, which is a great name, called Bull Payne, which I don't know who that is, but I will.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. I do think he is somebody, but I don't remember exactly. I'll see if I can't look this up.
Frank Vizzi, who went by Bull Payne, Rick Gantner, and Psycho. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm looking. Yeah, I just found that myself, and I don't think I necessarily remember him, but he was around. So there you go. Maybe we'll have to do Bull Payne at some point.
I would love that. And so at this point, he would be wrestling as the Midnight Rider, and he would obviously get a little bit more success there. He won the television championship, and he teamed with his sister and Baby Doll in mixed tag team matches. And
it should be mentioned he was married to Baby Doll. I was
just gonna go there. Yep.
Covered that when we were talking family, because of course that came later, but they were married for, I don't remember how long, but they had 2 kids.
Yeah, I want to say 87 to 93 or 94, somewhere along those lines. And since we are going down that path, it is worth mentioning that, again, from multiple sources, his relationship with Baby Doll and maybe the way he acted during it didn't do him any favors. According to Tony Schiavone, he would kind of get into Baby Doll's ear and tell her, you shouldn't put up with this, you should ask for more money. And that really didn't get him in well. And Arn Anderson tells a specific story where apparently he and some of the boys wanted Baby Doll to get them some food. It was late at night or something along those lines. And, she was going to go get it. And Sam Houston said they should go get their food themselves. And when they found out that that's when the guys requesting the food didn't get it and found out that's what happened, he would eventually be gone from the territory soon thereafter. Whether or not that was the only event that caused it, who knows? But it does seem like, he was opening cards and she was very high up on the card and probably getting paid more. Relationships in wrestling, as they say, are not always going to work out.
Yeah, I saw Baby Doll at an indie show a few years ago, and she was, just there signing autographs. But her daughter was wrestling on the card, and I don't remember what name she was using, but I didn't realize at the time that would have been her and Sam Houston's daughter. They did not mention that she was Sam Houston's daughter, but of course Sam wasn't there, so what have you. But, I didn't realize that at the time that's who that would have been.
Right. And so also against like I said, the mixed tag team matches were against Bull Payne and Samantha Payne. So we are definitely revisiting Bull and Samantha Payne.
All right.
He would return to WCW in the summer of 1993. He would be facing Frankie Lancaster, and he would wrestle in dark matches, teaming with Mike Starr, and he would also be teaming with Mike Starr against Harlem Heat, which they obviously lost. He was defeated by the Honky Tonk Man, both in WWF and WCW, which is probably not the greatest accolade to your career. But he would finish up there in September 26, 1994. His match against the Honky Tonk Man was his last match, so maybe that ticked him off too. And from there, he was on the independent circuit, where he still is. And before Leonard kind of takes the reins here, we should mention that he did have demons in his life. Bruce Pritchard talks about that, but he talks about how I don't think those demons were really bothering him when he was in WWF. But in the article that I read, Pro Wrestling Stories, he talks about how he had issues with drinking, and eventually he would, try to commit suicide. And, it's a sad part of his story, but not the end of it, because he would kick out, as they say, and he would find religion. And from what I can see, he has a very good relationship with his daughters. And, based on what Leonard has told me, he seems like a pretty happy guy. So
yeah,
why don't you talk about your interaction with him?
Yeah, well, before I talk about that, I do want to talk a little bit about, we didn't talk a lot about some of his matches, his actual matches. I had some things there because I did watch some of his WWF stuff. I watched a match against Jerry Gray in '88, which he won, against Barry Horowitz in '89, which he won, a match against the Red Rooster, Ted DiBiase, Big Boss Man, and I did watch a promo of him and Danny Davis with Jimmy Hart. And in that promo, Houston is very stumbling and fumbling with his words, and Jimmy Hart calls him out on it. Says, are you tongue-tied? Like, it's so bad that Jimmy has to point it out so he can draw heat. And Sam actually says, hey, I'm in front of 20,000 people, I get a little nervous. And I think that was one of the biggest problems with Sam Houston
Right.
was he was way too nervous and was way too awkward in the ring. Of all the matches, I would say he had good quickness. He had nice arm drags, nice arm bars, nice drop kicks. He's not near the ring general that Jake Roberts is, his brother,
Right.
because there was a few times where Houston just looked kind of lost as to where he should go or what he should, and would just kind of lose it. You know, you could see the mind kind of blank, and in at least two of them where he fumbled big time,
Right.
where you could tell that they either tripped each other up or he didn't duck enough, and they ended very, very awkwardly. I would like to say a cool spot in the Horowitz match I watched was Barry had him down a Boston Crab, and Sam pats Horowitz on the back. He thinks it's the referee saying, okay, Barry, let go, you won. And he lets go and he celebrates. And then Sam comes back and hits the Bulldog and wins the match. And I had never seen that before, but I thought that was a brilliant way to break the crab when he didn't have any other way to do it, to kind of trick him into breaking the hold. I really enjoyed that. So the reason I wanted to talk about Sam Houston is that a few weeks ago at the time of this recording, friends of the show, Dan and Ronnie and I went to an indie show in Lancaster, Ohio by Premier Wrestling Association. And we went because Jimmy Hart was advertised to be there. And he was very nice. And we talked to him and got pictures and all that. And then during the show, the second match of the night was for their version of the US title. And the champ comes out, and I don't remember his name, but he's wearing a shirt that says, I beat Sam Houston. I actually took a picture of that and texted it to Chad. And we were all like, that's really cool. Like, we want that shirt. So the champ lays out his opponent, beats him up. He can't wrestle. He can't meet the bell. So the promoter comes out, the owner of the promotion comes out, and he says, well, since he can't wrestle, I've got a substitute opponent for you. And I can't remember if I said it or Ronnie said it. Man, it would be cool if it was Sam Houston. And it was Sam Houston. He comes out. This is the loudest pop I've probably ever heard at an indie show. And again, there wasn't more than 250 people there. He's playing the crowd great. There's a lot of stalling from the heel to start. There's a lot of pre-match stuff. They get into it. Sam wins with the Bulldog. Cuts a nice promo to the crowd, although we're pretty sure that he said something about the fine people of Lansing, Michigan, even though he was in Lancaster, Ohio. And after they went to intermission right after that, so we got to talk to Sam, get pictures with him, autographs. So nice, so very cool. I was actually wearing the Strike Force shirt that you got me last Christmas, and the promoter came up to talk to him and said, "Oh, Strike Force, that's a cool shirt." And Sam was like, "Oh yeah, I used to party with those guys all the time, man." And how he was friends with Rick and Tito, of course, they were there at the same time. But he was very neat. And one thing I wanted to mention, because Ronnie and I got to talking, is how do you have Sam Houston, but you don't promote him? And then we thought, well, Jimmy Hart's going to bring you in as many people as Jimmy Hart's going to bring you in extra. Sam, too, probably isn't going to do that much more for you. But if you have him as a surprise, and then he comes out, we went ballistic. Like, all three of us were like, I didn't realize how huge of a Sam Houston fan I was until right now, because he wasn't announced. And you've got all these people. It was a fun show. We all had a great time. Was it the best wrestling I ever saw on an indie show? No, but it was a really fun show. It's probably one of the most fun shows I've been to. And people are going to go home happy, and they're going to tell friends about that. And you're going to think next time they have a show, hey, who knows who's going to be there? We got to go, because you don't know what they're going to do. So I thought that was great booking. Once we talked it out, we were like, yeah, this is actually pretty smart booking on their part. And another thing I want to say here is that after watching everything we watched, and again, I only saw this one match and this one appearance by Sam, I would say he's better now at the age of 58 than he was 30-some years ago. He looks better, I think. He has actually put on some muscle definition. because you know how when people get older, like the muscles kind of get heavier, they have like a bulkier look to them. So he looks bulkier. He has a goatee, which kind of hides the baby face. There's some gray in that, some gray in his hair. He dresses like Terry Funk, and he has this very grizzled cowboy look, and he looks good. And the number one thing, as opposed to back then to now, Sam Houston was a baby face, but you didn't really see him smile. He wasn't smiling a lot in the promos in the ring. He had an ear to ear grin. I'm sure Chad, because I sent it to him, he will put for you on YouTube to watch right now the picture of me and Sam Houston together. I'm sure that's popping up right now.
There you go.
And you can see the smile on Sam's face. It's almost as big as mine, being with Sam Houston. Note, I sent that to my wife, who had no idea who he was, but she said I look like a kid on Christmas morning. And that joy that he had being there and interacting with the fans and being in the ring, that was a joy and exuberance you do not see during his main career in the matches and promos that we've talked about so far. And I think that was a huge, huge difference for him. And a lot of that probably had to do with the demons that you were talking about, the alcoholism and those types of issues, that he's, past that. He did talk a lot about having found Jesus and putting faith in the Lord and all of this. And I should show the Sam Houston card I got.
There you go.
Which encourages people to join Sam Houston Fan Nation on Facebook, and I would encourage everyone to do that. But the bottom of the card has a Bible verse. It's Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So he's very much giving that message when he goes out. And I'm not saying that anyone would do this, but I think you could get a 3 or 4 month program out of Sam if you brought him in as this grizzled veteran, one last shot. Maybe you announce him he's a trainer, or you do some sort of special Legends night. NWA would do this. I think the NWA could do this and do it successfully. I don't know about anybody else, but I would love to see Sam Houston get a shot somewhere, because I honestly think he's probably the best that he's ever been. And again, he's not as fast as he used to be. And there's only so much he can do in the ring. Man's 58 years old. But the energy and the passion and the joy he has, I think, makes him better than he was as physical prime. And again, this is off just seeing him at one indie show. But as you can tell, I was thoroughly impressed.
Well, that's good to hear. And, AEW has used Legends as well. They, in various forms. But I agree that it would probably make more sense in terms of legacy and his history to show up on NWA television or whatever they have these days. Anyway, NWA Hour I know is somewhere. But yeah, that's really great to hear. And I do remember the fact that he did look really happy, and I didn't even put the connection about how you didn't really see him smile too much in his younger days. Maybe because of all the pressure that he was under, and the fact that whatever he was doing outside of the ring, partying, whatnot, and kind of trying to live up to his family's legacy, and the fact that he was not as big as everybody else, and trying to move up the card, all that stuff I'm sure played a part in it. Whereas now, I think he's just enjoying life more.
Yeah.
Not to speak for him, of course, but
no. He recently got remarried. He mentioned that, and his wife was there. And his wife was helping out with, handling the money at his table. And she seems to do a lot of the stuff on the Facebook page, because I did join the Facebook page, and she seems to be active on there.
Right. Yeah, and like we said, we talked about his family and who he was married to, and he would be in prison in 2005. He was sentenced to 10 years for repeated DUI arrests.
Let me tell you, you have to have a lot of DUIs to get 10 years in prison.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. He had an average of 2 DUI arrests per year for the past 10 years before he was sent to prison.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, but like we said, he got past that, and he had a home near New Orleans, which was destroyed during Hurricane Katrina, which is sad to hear. He works in construction and does a lot of charity stuff for the people in New Orleans, it seems, and it's all good stuff. It seems now, and I don't know at which point in his career he did the music video, Leonard, but we haven't talked about that yet. Would you like to talk
Well,
about into music?
it's another clip that I found that I sent you, and I did find a couple interviews with him online where he talks about his foray into music. And I guess the one daughter is also singing and does music. The other daughter does wrestling. And it is Sam in a cemetery, and he's pretty much dressed as he is on this card, and how he dresses now for the ring. You know, that sort of rough cowboy look, and what I call a Terry Funk kind of look. And he is, I would say, it's more spoken word to music than him actually singing.
Right.
But
yeah.
him talking about the night that he found God and salvation. I believe that was while he was in prison. And I did find an interview where he talked about trying to commit suicide in prison and how the noose broke. He made a noose out of bed sheets or whatever and tried to hang himself, and it broke. And he said that I guess before he jumped off the bed or whatever it was, he said, you know, God, this is in your hands. If you want me to stay, then you got to save me. And it happened, and then that's where he found, I guess, religion from there. And this song is about that, or as I said, more spoken word to music. He's about as good of a singer as Joe Exotic.
It's true, but he seemed to understand his strengths in the fact that he doesn't do a lot of singing in it. It is mostly spoken word, but it's a fun footnote.
Yes, and the sentiment is there. I think there's an earnest emotion and feeling to why he wanted to do that. So
I wonder if he has a full album. I would like to know.
I don't know. He did talk about having recorded. The one clip I saw, someone said about recording an album, and he said, "No, I have a song." So I think maybe it was a song.
Yeah. Well, he is, one of those guys that has stayed around, and despite the fact that I think in an interview I read with, or not read, but saw with Jim Crockett before he passed, he had talked about how Sam Houston had all the tools, but maybe didn't, commit himself as much. And it certainly seems like, he's in a better headspace these days. I certainly think he had pretty good in-ring work. If you had put a manager with him, maybe kind of shifted his gimmick up a little bit, I definitely don't think that the happy-go-lucky cowboy babyface role was a good long-term gimmick for him. I think it certainly worked in certain territories, but once you get into the WWF and WCW, you kind of have to shift your gimmick and your character a little bit. What do you think,
He
Larry?
should have joined the York Foundation as Samuel Houston.
That everybody should join the York Foundation and just make it their full name. They really should. Yeah. Like that. That would have been fantastic. And I don't even know what he would have looked like wearing a suit. Maybe a suit like kind of like somebody from the show Dallas, like a suit with
right, like with the hat and the bolo tie type of thing. Yes. Having like the J.R. Ewing suit.
Yeah,
I think we're on to something.
Imagine if they had brought him back with JBL as well. Oh man, that would have been money right there. I'm sure. I wonder what would he look like playing a heel too. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if I did. We ever read? I don't think I ever read where he played a heel. I think he was one. I think he was face everywhere he went.
It certainly seems like that. If he ever did that, then I don't know.
Yeah.
If he would like to come on the show and talk about that, he can.
Yes. Well, I'm going to probably post the link to this to the Sam Houston Facebook page. So hopefully he will see it. And Sam, if you do, know that we love you. I love you dearly, especially now. And I think he would probably agree with some of our criticisms about his early career. And we would love to have you on and do an interview with you and talk. So like I said, I'm a member of the Facebook page. find me, brother, and we'll get this hooked up.
Absolutely. And so we'll cap it off here with some of his accomplishments. He was the NWA Central States Heavyweight Champion, the GWF Television Champion, the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Champion, the NWA ARC Louisiana Texas Heavyweight Championship, which is the ARC Law Tex Heavyweight Championship, which is a great belt name.
We need to put that on our belt list for Fever Dreams.
I am going to look. I guarantee that's not on there. And I'm going to look it up just because I really want to know what that looks like. He was the PWA Tag Team Champion one time with Charlie Norris, the VWA, which is the Virginia Wrestling Association Heavyweight Champ, and the World Class Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Champion one time. So thank you for joining us in our talk about Sam Houston. If you have any memories or matches that we might not have talked about that you think we should check out, please let us know. You can listen to us on podcast form if you check out Apple Podcast or Spotify. Please hit the like button on this YouTube video and subscribe to our channel. And, if Sam Houston subscribed to our channel, I think that'd be awesome. Just saying. But
thumbs up, Sam.
Right. So for Leonard, my name is Chad. We will come to you with more shows in 2022, probably new ideas, new move breakdowns, all arm drags in 2022. And we will see you next week. Alexa, we'll see you out.